Alcohol Tipping Point is brought to you in partnership with Speak Studios and Speak Boise. Speak Boise is a community-driven studio space where voices from all walks of life can speak and be heard. You can find them on Instagram and Facebook at Speak Studios, Speak Boise, and at their website, speakstudios.com. Speak Studios, speak and be heard. This podcast is also brought to you by Instant Imprints. Promote better with Instant Imprints. Instant Imprints are Boise's visual communications experts and your place for everything you need to promote your business, club, school, or group. As a locally owned business, Instant Imprints specializes in making your organization more visible with custom branded apparel, embroidery, promotional items, print services, and wide format printing for signs, as well as banners and vehicle graphics. Want better ways to get noticed? Visit Instant Imprints at instantimprints.com/Boise or call 208-IMPRINT. That's 208-467-7468. Welcome back to Alcohol Tipping Point. I'm your host, Debbie Maisner, coming to you live from Boise, Idaho. I guess it won't be live. This is a podcast, not a radio show. But I do want to do a shout out to a local place here, Forenza Pizza. They have a Boise Revival Project. And what it is, it's helping musicians who've had to struggle through COVID and helping local restaurants as well. And it's just to bring entertainment and community back to downtown Boise. And you can go check them out on social or at boiserevivalproject.com. And there will be live concerts every Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. And again, that's downtown Boise, Idaho at Forenza Pizza. So Craig is our guest, actually calling in from Florida. So Craig, can you make it to downtown Boise?
I'll give it my best shot.
Okay. Well, I just want to throw out a little Boise plug. If nobody has been here, it's amazing. Okay, but Craig Noble is my guest today for our show, and he is the author of a new book called Rethinking Drinking, The Influence That Everyone is Under. And he sent me the book. I read it. It's very interesting, unique, and just like a good thought exercise about drinking and our culture and how we talk to our kids and all sorts of things. So I'm super excited to have you here, Craig. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and tell me a little bit about yourself. You're in Florida, as we all know.
Yeah, I'm actually in South Florida, so it's a little different. There are different parts of Florida that almost are, different cultures, and South Florida is sort of the New York, New Jersey of the country. There are parts of central and northern Florida that are completely different cultures, and I'm in the part that's more like New York and New Jersey, so southeastern Florida.
Fantastic. Okay. And then tell me a little bit about just your background and your experience with alcohol.
Yeah, my experience with alcohol started when I was, probably when I was a little kid. My dad was a big beer drinker, and excuse me, my mother, not really a drinker at all, but having sips of my dad's beer when I was a kid, not really thinking much of it. And and then when I got one of my first jobs at 15 years old, some of the guys in the grocery store I was working with were get together after work and, grab a 6-pack from the cooler, leave, the cash on the counter for the manager and, sort of sit outside and shop talk and, just enjoy a few beers. And that made a lot of sense to me. So, because that's how I watched my dad grow up, drinking beer with his friends after work and it seemed like the thing to do. So that was the beginning of my experience with alcohol, and it didn't really change too much throughout the rest of my teens. And even into my 20s and 30s, it was just sort of a social experience for me. A number of times I got sick and, a number of times, made a fool of myself or said the wrong thing or whatever. But all of that I just considered normal, and everyone around me considered that normal. It was social. Sometimes things happen and, you just kind of go with it. No one really pointed fingers or judged or anything, no matter how, messy it got. It was never dangerous and just, came off as normal to me. The next phase of my relationship with alcohol, where it started to turn, was more into my late 30s, where I was involved in a business that was really hard. And it ended up turning out very, very well for everybody involved. But I turned to alcohol, not just as a social sort of experience, but, started drinking at home alone after work. And, at that time also, somehow or another, I got turned on to blue cheese martinis. So I went from drinking beer and enjoying myself with my friends to, the gourmet drink experience by myself at home and sort of calming down from the end of the day. And I think it was the combination of my not managing my emotional and work life very well, along with the more addictive and more heavy experience of vodka as opposed to beer, that it just grabbed me. And that became the slide toward, I actually became addicted to alcohol. So, the next phase after that was realizing I had a problem, and someone turned me on to AA, and spent a number of years in and out of AA, drinking, not drinking, trying to figure it out. It's just, I think AA for me, it more confused me than anything else. And it took me about 10 years to just stop going back and forth to AA. And, finally, I found an outpatient sort of a group counseling situation. And that was what turned the corner eventually. And ultimately for me, it was understanding from a clinical point of view and a licensed therapist point of view, what is happening with my brain, what was happening with my social relationships, where AA fits or fit with me, where it doesn't fit. And then ultimately, now I've been, I haven't drank in, I can't tell you how long. I don't keep track of the time, because that was one of the things I did in AA, and I have a bad feeling about it. But that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah. So you sound like you started out like a lot of us do, just kind of drinking socially, and it just progressed to more and more where it was kind of an outlet, but then it became something to ease the pain of work, stress, life. And then you, like a lot of people, you tried AA and then found another option that worked for you.
Yeah, I haven't been back to AA in many years. And, even in this outpatient sort of, group therapy kind of situation that I still go to and super enjoy. I just like the clinical approach. I like the meeting being led by somebody, and I like everyone being able to crosstalk. And in AA, you're not allowed to crosstalk. So, I just, I found what works for me. And, I know a number of people, including the people that I still spend time with, in my, group meeting that just swear by AA. And I think it's awesome, to find what works for you. And, this more therapy situation works for me. I can't get enough of it. I super enjoy understanding what's going on with everybody and kind of feeling like I've got my feet underneath me and understand what's happening in the world. And that's the point of view that I wrote that book from. What is this? What is this?
Well, that's a good transition. So and this is your first book, because it sounds like you have 3 more coming out.
2 more, yeah.
Oh, that's right. So 3 total. This first one, Rethinking Drinking, the influence that everyone is under. Tell me a little bit about that. I've read it, but for our listeners, tell me about that book and what led you to write it.
Yeah, so the book is basically, it was inspired by an experience that my son and I had a few years ago with our neighbor who got dropped off by the police and was, swaying, kind of, slurring drunk. And it's the first experience that my son had with anyone that behaved like that. Although, everyone grows up with, family members and friends drinking, and my son included, no one ever slurring or stumbling around. And his reaction was, was very judgy. It was impatient. It was, it was not nice. And, at that point in our life, he was, early teens. And now he's just about to be 18. So it's a number of years ago. His reaction kind of had me think about what is really going on, because, he's going to continue to have relationships with, friends and family, and they're going to be drinking. And I don't want him to think that someone stumbling around is automatically a bad thing. And I started thinking about my own past relationship with alcohol and how slippery it got. And I didn't really understand it. And I really sat down to, like I said, I was inspired to explain it to him. But I also figured it out for myself. And after I ended up explaining it to him, I said, this is a great book idea. I've always wanted to write a book. The business that I had trouble with that had me really in an awful emotional state, and ended up turning out well, provided enough money for me to, concentrate full time on writing this book. And it seemed like a good use of my time. So that's where the book came from. And it's basically an observation of how most people are under the influence, whether they're drinking or not, because of the advertising, because it's in our entertainment space, songs on the radio and television shows and movies, and then also the advertising itself. Maybe I said advertising first. So it's three things. It's word of mouth, how people sort of talk about alcohol being, what it is. The second thing is our entertainment. And then the third thing is the advertising. And it just creates, alcohol almost everywhere. And when I stumbled into that, I'm like, how does anyone not have a problem with alcohol? So that's what the book is about. It's explaining it to my son with zero blame and zero judgment, and just understanding that people are doing the best that they can. But this stuff is slippery, despite what the advertising says, despite what people talk about, despite how it's glamorized in our society. And I'm really proud of it. I read it this week before you and I talked this morning. And, I wrote it last year, the year before, and I still love it. So anybody that's interested in buying it, I still stand by it. It's really good stuff.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting to take apart one just episode, one event, which was your neighbor being returned home by the police, and just how it affected the different people around him. So, one person was drinking, but there was a police officer, there was a dad, his son, your neighbor who was drinking, and your neighbor's wife, and all of them had different responses and were affected by alcohol as well, by this one person's night on the town.
Yeah, it was, when I thought about it, in terms of, it was kind of conjecture, because I can't get into her head. As wife said, I can't get into his head. But having the experience that I've had, drinking from, off and on from the time that I was 15 years old for 20 plus years, everyone kind of has the same reaction. It's not really hard to figure out. And when I started thinking about it, and thinking about, the policeman's, point of view, for example, how often he sees it, he just isn't affected by it. Isn't it kind of sad, that people aren't affected by it? And now, I don't know about, in Boise, but in Fort Lauderdale, where I live, it is just holy cow everywhere. And it's not relaxing and have fun. It is screaming and yelling, and it's like a party, like almost constantly. And I was out the other night, and a bartender had said, I don't know how we got onto it, but said in 2019, it was the biggest year for, restaurant sales in terms of alcohol. And he said, now in 2021, we're heading to double what it was in 2019, not just because many people are moving to Florida, but because of this kind of alcohol culture that's being kind of perpetuated. And I just found that to be, not only fascinating, but kind of sad at the same time. And I don't think people know what they're getting into. I consider myself a pretty smart guy. And this happened to me. I slipped into it. I became dependent and addicted to alcohol. And, no one ever intends for that. And, I don't think that people realize how slippery it is.
Yeah, I liked in your book how you kind of took apart the slogan, what they put on most like drinking campaigns for alcohol products, to drink responsibly, and that's it. And then you had added your own, you and your son, it sounds like, came up with your own addition to that slogan, which was alcohol is a mind altering habit forming substance that affects everyone differently, and all of us is under the influence, whether we're drinking or not. Did I get your new campaign slogan right?
You did. And I just finished reading the book, this morning, or reading that last section of it this morning. And it is, if the alcohol companies were to come and talk to me about, hey, Craig, what should we do with our slogan? It just needs a few more words. And the reason that I think it just needs a few more words is that you want to keep it small enough that people can bite off and chew it and kind of, understand it. But then, there's actually something to talk about there. If a son or a daughter would notice those words on the screen, hey, mom or dad, what does mind altering mean? What does habit forming mean? What does it mean it affects everyone differently? I think that would start the conversation, because in my opinion, if you ask a dozen people what drink responsibly means, you're going to get a dozen different answers, or you're going to get a look like, well, it just means don't drink too much. Okay, well, why not? So my idea with that slogan, if it were to exist, is to start a conversation, because to me, the two words together, drink responsibly, it just comes off as so brilliantly incomplete, and it's also like a disclaimer for them at the same time, because we all know that, somebody that makes a mess drinking, well, they drank too much. Well, that's on them. Well, shouldn't some of the responsibility be with the alcohol companies themselves? And, no, because they told us to drink responsibly. So to me, the more I thought about it, the funnier, in a not funny kind of a way it got. Like, this is really brilliant. They've come up with instructions and a disclaimer in two words at the same time. And no one really thinks about it. They just continue to make messes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been reading a lot about just marketing in general, and alcohol, obviously, and just how we view alcohol now, and kind of compared to tobacco in the past. I mean, talk about a 180 that our society has done with smoking. And now it's socially unacceptable to smoke. I mean, you're kind of a pariah, at least here in Boise, if you're smoking. Like, everybody knows smoking is bad for you. Smoking causes cancer. That is on the packages. There's no advertisements for smoking anymore. But then alcohol, which is also dangerous. It's a carcinogen. There's no doubt it has consequences. It's bad for you, but it's just out there. It's a party, man. And it is the social norm. I mean, and they don't even need to market it anymore, right? We market it ourselves. I mean, the whole mommy wine culture and all the memes and all the coffee cups, like, this might be coffee, all the, kids are the reason moms drink. Like, we're doing our own marketing for drinking.
Well, you
alcohol.
We are. And I did the research on it. I mean, the numbers in terms of what the alcohol companies altogether spend on advertising and their return on investment in terms of their overall revenue, it's astounding. It's astounding. So even if they took the television commercials off and the billboards down and whatever, I think it would take a really long time for people to stop talking about, just how fun and innocent and, whatever. Just don't drink and drive. Just don't drink when you're pregnant. Just don't drink when you're at work. Just don't drink when you're breastfeeding. But otherwise, have at it in your coffee, with lunch, at dinner, on and on and on. When you start thinking about it, it's absolutely amazing. So initially you asked me about the book, and we're talking about it now, but the more I thought about it, the more it became obvious to me that it's right in front of us, plain as day, every single day, all around us. And we don't realize how much of a mess it's causing because it's so normal and because it's so accepted.
Yeah. And actually, when they do the harm scores of different substances like heroin, cocaine, meth, marijuana, alcohol is the number one harm score, has the number one harm score of any other substance by far.
Is that harm in terms of what it does to your body, or harm in terms of like quantity of people affected?
It's both. So it's harm to society,
It is, okay.
to your body, people affected. Like it has a very high harm score.
Yeah, it was a number of years ago. I don't really watch NASCAR, but I did for a little while years ago. And I was so surprised that, beer is everywhere in NASCAR. But years ago, there was the first, I forget which number it was, but it was the first car that had Crown Royale on the hood. And I'm like, holy cow, a liquor on the hood of the car. Now, this was years ago, and I thought that was interesting because I've always been a fan of marketing. But now that I look back on it, it's alcohol. It's the same as beer. It's the same as wine. It's the same as, all the seltzers. It's alcohol. So you're advertising alcohol at a driving event. And I'm like, well, this doesn't make any sense. So.
Yeah. So, just the number of deaths that are caused by alcohol compared to other substances. And yet it is so normalized and part of our culture. But going back
Agreed.
to teen, this kind of made me think of now even you were talking about liquor, and now it's become more of a norm, kind of that malt liquor that's in White Claws, that drink that's really for young teenage girls, but and it's insane, but they have really shifted their marketing to these kind of sweet seltzer, healthy drinks, which is marketing more and more to younger kids. And you talk a lot in your book about your teens' experience. And so I was wondering if you could just kind of break down how to talk to our teenagers about this.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and one that I think I lay out really well in the book. I think where it starts with the conversation is to understand, first of all, that teenagers know everything. They can actually teach it to you. And if you go in with that understanding, and let them think that they're going to show you and teach you something and say, sort of validate everything they're saying, but have a conversation. Okay, have you thought about this also? To completely validate what they're saying, because they already know everything. Otherwise, they're going to shut down. Mm-hmm. And then when you start explaining the real point that you want them to get, it's kind of alongside what they already know. I think that's the tactic.
Yeah, I have a 14-year-old, almost 15-year-old, and we've been having conversations about alcohol, and kind of more around safety also, because your son sounds amazing. I have to say, as I was reading that, the fact that
he is.
The fact that he was like so taken aback by the drunk neighbor and just like, why do people even drink? Whereas my teen's more curious and has experimented, and I'm just kind of like, wow, what are some other tips for talking to them? Obviously, she does know everything. I don't even know that we need to keep her in school anymore, but what are some other tips you have for teens?
I think that, what's worked with him is just to answer his questions. The beginning of my book, the introduction, it talks about how all of this came about, and he started asking questions about, what is that, on a billboard, or, what is that on a television commercial? Because, the alcohol advertising is everywhere. And of course, like we talked about, a minute ago, it's in all of our, songs and TV shows and whatever too. So the conversations with him started because he was asking questions. And like I said, in the beginning of the book, I basically just kind of dismissed it. I kind of just couched it. I kind of just brushed it off by answering his questions, but not answering his questions. And as soon as it got to the point where, he was upset, I said to myself, geez, I really have to start answering his questions. But to find that balance, to not say it's bad for you or poison. And again, I don't want to tell people what to do, because there are many people on, Instagram and online, on the different forums that think it's poison and it works for them. And that's what they want to teach their kids. And, have at it. I don't think it's healthy. I don't think it's a good idea to teach judgment like that. But I think people should do what they think works for them. And I think to walk that line with my son or any other the parents whose kids ask me to, kind of get involved in the conversation, it really is just to validate what they're saying, really answer their questions, without contributing to the glamour and without, causing them to tip into the, the judgment side or the blame side that alcohol is bad and it's wrong. It can be, so the conversation is necessary. It shouldn't be dismissed, but to walk the line and be careful not to be judgy or blamey, that's what's necessary.
Yeah. And that makes sense. Trying to think it out a little bit more too.
Yeah, and the reason I say that is because I don't think it's going to go the way of smoking. I really don't. I think that, if alcohol is consumed in a responsible way, and my message actually gets out there, what responsibility really means, and that's a very long conversation. People are going to drink more responsibly. At this point, they just don't understand how slippery it is. So when the world gets to that place, if I have anything to do with it, I don't want my son or any of the kids that I've talked to understand alcohol as bad or poisonous or whatever, because I don't want them looking at people and automatically jumping to conclusions about their life or about their habits or about their, whatever. So I think this is a really important conversation to have with kids and adults. And I think it's going to contribute to people really learning how to drink responsibly. Because like I said, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I don't think alcohol is going to go anywhere in terms of going away.
Yeah, I think that I'm with you where I just want people to be educated. And I think a lot of people aren't educated about alcohol. Like you said, it is an addictive substance, just so
Yeah.
you know. It does cause cancer, just so you know. But, we all ultimately want to be free to make our own choices. And then also just assigning a substance as good or bad. I work in a wellness department at a hospital. I work with a lot of dietitians, and they actually talk about food this way. There's no good food or bad food. There's only food. It doesn't, what does that even mean? That's just an adjective. That's not necessarily a fact, what makes something good or bad. But part of it is to take the power away from cake or sugar. When you say you can't have that, you can never have that. That just kind of triggers your limbic system, your emotional system to be like, what? Now I want it.
Right. Well, what you were just saying made me think of another sort of tactic or style that conversations that I've had with people younger than me, or even people that are older than me that have they're acting young because they got too much alcohol in their system. The reason they're paying attention to what I'm saying is I'm telling them what it means to them. So it's not just, stay away from cake. Listen, this is what it does to your body. This is what it does to your nervous system. So enjoy a piece of cake. You probably shouldn't have 3 because this is what's going to happen. So the conversations that I've learned work for my son, he actually articulated it for me. Dad, the difference between the way that you talk to me and other people talk to me is they tell me what to do, but they don't tell me why they're saying what they're saying. Mm-hmm. And they certainly don't tell me what it means to my life at this particular time, as a 15-year-old, 16-year-old, 17-year-old. So I try to, when I'm answering these questions and talking about alcohol, relate it to where they are in their relationship with it. What does this mean? What does it do to me? Why do I care? Because it's so easy for someone to say, so what, and walk away. But really, they don't say what. They don't say so what. They just walk away. They're not listening anymore. So I'm sure if I was to talk to another parent, you got to tell them what it means to them. And you can't scare them because they can't be scared, right? They're bulletproof. But this is what it means. You have 1 piece of cake, you're probably fine. You get in the habit of having 2 or 3 pieces of cake every day. Listen, you're going to blow up because that's just what sugar does to your body. It just is.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good stuff. Now, on the other side of things, what would you say are your top tips, your top advice you'd give to someone who wants to give up alcohol?
All right. So that's a really good question. I'll tell you, I had a DM. I'm in South Florida, like I said. I had a DM conversation going back and forth with a woman in Melbourne, Australia, 2 nights ago. So it's noon her time and 11 o'clock my time, something like that. And her husband, she liked my Instagram feed and just reached out and told me who she was. And right. And I just got into this conversation with her over DM. And I'll summarize it for you the same way I summarize it for her. Her husband needs to understand three things. Number one, you got to want to quit. Number two, you got to believe that you can. Number three, you got to maintain it with some sort of clarity of purpose, some kind of purpose and a clarity about that purpose that is bigger than alcohol. So that's family, that's a hobby, that's, your work, whatever it is, it's bigger and you can't drink alongside of doing it. That's the way to maintain it. The fourth piece, which sort of covers all three, is you have to surround yourself with people that are doing the same thing you're doing or support you in that. So to me, if someone wants to change their relationship with alcohol, number one, you got to want it. Number two, you have to believe that you can have it. Number three, there's a clarity of purpose that is bigger than alcohol. And number four, you're surrounding yourself with people that are doing the same thing or are supporting you heavy duty with what you're trying to do.
Yeah, find your tribe. I mean, we're such a tribal society, and when the tribal norm is to drink, it's really hard to go against the grain. So finding people that aren't drinking is so important. Community is very important.
Yeah, and chances are, when you find that the third piece, the clarity of purpose, the thing that is bigger than drinking, if you find those people to spend time with and, you're learning how to play softball or whatever it is, chances are they love it as much as you would like to love it or you're getting into it. They're not boozing while they're doing it. So that counts, and I think that speaks to AA. Everyone in AA, for the most part, is not drinking, so that's a supportive community of people saying, don't drink today. All right. For me, it wasn't enough. I needed that clarity of purpose piece. That's what was missing there.
Yeah. So what is your clarity of purpose?
Oh, well, it's this work I'm doing now. I mean, I wrote this book. I was going to write two more. And now the more feedback that I get about it, I think there is a movement associated with it. I think there's something that can exist alongside of AA. I think there's something that can exist alongside smart recovery. I think there's something that can exist that is short of, going into full-blown therapy and examining, all of your, nuts and bolts. I think there's some kind of middle ground that isn't out there. And I'd like to pursue that, not only for adults that are trying to change their relationship with alcohol, but also for kids before they get involved in it too much and, find themselves having a correct course. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Craig. I think the way we treat alcohol addiction is we treat it at the end and we don't pre-treat it. We don't do as much prevention or like I said, I'm a wellness nurse and we do pre-diabetes counseling. We do pre-hypertension. We do all these kind of disease management pre-interventions, but we don't do that with alcohol and drinking. We want that person to be rock bottom before they get any treatment.
Yeah, and I think that my son's mother and his stepfather are heavily into the church, and their thing is, we'd like you to know about Jesus. And Ty and I talk. I believe in God. I believe there's a sort of a way to the universe and all that. But my thing isn't to answer questions that people aren't asking because I don't think they're listening. And they have a different calling and they have a different approach to their strong belief. I have just as strong a belief about alcohol, but I know for sure, that unless someone is asking me the question, they're not listening to my answer. So that said, because the alcohol advertising and, the society we live in, many kids grow up to kind of understand a lot about alcohol without even asking a question. I think this message that I'm talking about has to be sort of decorated and so slick and so sort of, put out there that people start to learn without having asked the question. So I'm still figuring out how to do that. But the way that I started with writing these three books is I just wanted to help myself. I wanted to put something out there. If someone was interested in reading it, I wrote a book. But now the more that I get into it, the first or the next tier was, geez, if no one's asking me the question, why are they going to answer? Why are they going to listen to the answer? And now I've gotten to the point where I actually have a pretty sharp marketing mind. There's a way to position this so people start paying attention, even though they're not asking the question. So I'm not sure that made a whole lot of sense, but
yeah, it did. It's give
okay,
them
good.
what, I mean, that going back to marketing, it's like give them what they want, not what they need. Or, you know what I mean? Like a lot of people just want, they want to drink moderately. They want to be like a normal drinker, quote unquote. But maybe that's not necessarily what they need. Maybe they are addicted and they need to completely abstain from alcohol. If I was to compare it to that.
Or in my situation, my business thing that brought all this about, the excessive drinking at home alone that turned into, dependence and an addiction, I wasn't solving the problem. I was feeling better, but I wasn't solving the problem. And that becomes very slippery. So if there's awareness out there that, maybe someone doesn't necessarily have heard my message, or your message, but someone else has heard it, and you see a friend who's starting to drink excessively, hey, have the conversation with them. Is there anything we can talk about? Is there something on your mind that because you seem to be drinking a lot, without calling them obsessive, without calling them heavy, without calling them an alcoholic. You're just drinking to the point where, is there something you want to talk about? I don't think people have that conversation. Because it's either alcoholic or not alcoholic, right? Or heavy drinker or casual drinker, and there's so many shades in between that it can be sort of, discussed before it gets to be, a huge problem. And I think that people shy away from it because it's not fun to talk about, a problem with alcohol.
No one wants to be labeled. There's definitely a stigma. There's a mental health stigma anyway, in our country, and absolutely. And if you're the person talking to someone, I mean, who is going to be that person? Because sometimes it's like shining a mirror on your own life.
Right.
Yeah. So interesting. What would you say are some other things you learned? You mentioned that outpatient therapy, group counseling, like that had been so much more helpful for you. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, my personality is, I'm more logical, I'm more mechanical. I definitely have a spiritual side. It's not a religious side, it's more spiritual. So I understand the value of prayer and meditation. I believe it works. I'm there. But the AA approach to me was more along the lines of, this is what you should do. Don't drink today because it's bad. You'll go to jail. You'll wreck your car. Your wife will leave you. Your husband will, whatever. And when I started asking questions in that forum, the answers were, they were kind of cryptic and almost making fun of. It was, well, just keep coming back, and the laugh or the, they have something that I don't have. And the difference between what they have and what I don't have is their time. So that's one of my things that has to do with, not broadcasting how much time I have because, I've been in this outpatient thing for the last year. And, it's almost like the sun has come out, little by little. And now I feel like I'm standing, it's just a gorgeous, clear day because of what I've learned. So again, I think that people should do what works for them. And the people that have 20 years and they're happy in AA and it's just keep coming back and that works for them, right on. I was not that person. So the therapy and the understanding of how my emotions were affected, my brain was affected, how long it's going to take to heal my brain, how I practiced my way into a lifestyle that was a bunch of alcohol triggers, how I'm going to practice my way out of it. That was very helpful to me. And it continues to be kind of the path that I'm on. So that's why the therapy works for me. Now, there are other people that I know for sure are in AA and they like the rules. I'll follow the rules. Just don't make me go back and examine my, previous relationship or my childhood or, Uncle so-and-so, called me a name when I was 5 and, they just don't want to go back there. And AA works for them. I don't have anything to say to them. But for me, I need to know why everything added up to this really smart, capable, all these positive things guy ended up, face down on the couch, drinking a bottle of vodka in an afternoon, and the therapy helps me with that.
Yeah, I think for me too, understanding the whys and understanding your brain is just like, wow, this is just how my brain works, and I'm not broken. Very helpful to have contextual explanations for things.
Yeah, for sure. And if you just pay attention to the word of mouth and the advertising and the stories on television, basically what alcohol is this legal kind of relaxing kind of party starter. And, no one talks about how it physiologically, chemically affects your brain. And when you say the word brain damage, people are like, oh, here comes another one of those. It really does damage your brain. It doesn't break it, but it damages your brain. And there needs to be a healing time physically. And then, of course, the emotional and the mental side kind of getting back to where your life, should be. That I learned in therapy and, group settings, listening to other people's stories. And it makes sense to me also when in South Florida, there's a pretty big homeless population. And when I see the guy on the side of the road with the, just need a beer or anything helps, and, he really looks very distraught. If that guy were to, or a girl, if they were to quit drinking, it's really hard. It's really hard physically, and it's really hard mentally because all those memories start rushing back. No wonder they stay addicted. No one's explaining to them, this is what's going on. But again, my three things, the first one is you got to want to stop. But the reason that they don't want to stop is that emotionally and physically, it's really hard. It seems insurmountable.
Yeah, it's painful.
Yeah.
So what do you see for your future besides, are you going to write those 2 books? It sounds like you're really excited about what's happened with this one. What else is going on?
I really am. I mean, I sat down to, with a bunch of notes about how I explained to my son and, talk to friends and family and, they're like, wow, this is your book idea, because I've been trying to write a book for years. So this finally turned into that. But it wasn't enough. So now there's 2 more and the next 2 have to do with, the merry-go-round of drinking and not drinking. And the third one has to do with recovery. And there are things that I've seen in recovery and in therapy situations that I think are missing the mark a little bit too. Again, just in my opinion. So I'm definitely going to finish these next 2 books. I'm working on them as we speak. And the other thing I'd like to do is probably develop more of like an awareness kind of a course, because some people don't like to read or don't like to listen to books, but they'll sit and watch a video. So that's in the works as well. And again, from my point of view about, seeing this, alcohol addiction and anyone's relationship with alcohol, there's kind of a continuum that exists where people don't realize that they're moving along until all of a sudden they cross the line and now they can't drink anymore. And I think if people had a heads up about that, I think it would help a lot of people. I wish it existed for me. So I'm going to write 2 more books and I'm going to create this course. And I think it's going to fit well alongside of the AA stuff. I think it's going to fit well alongside of the rehab stuff. And I think it's going to fit well with people that are trying to explain something to their kids and not come off judgmental because they're drinking while they're sort of explaining to their kids to be careful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I look forward to reading your next books. How can someone find you?
I get in touch with by or through Instagram at Rethinking the Influence. And then also my website, same thing, rethinkingtheinfluence.com. There's a way to message me through there. And then we can set up a conversation from that contact. But those are the 2 best ways.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Craig, so much. So much to talk about, so much good stuff. I really appreciate you and what you're doing, and I'm glad that you took the time to come and talk to the listeners of the show.
Yes, and I appreciate you inviting me. I love what you're doing. I'm going to listen to your other podcast. The one that I just listened to was very good. I think that more awareness needs to happen, and I think we can, not make alcohol go away, but make people a little more aware of what responsibility means with it. In which case, I think this would be a much easier place to live.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I appreciate you. Enjoy sunny Florida, and then come to Boise sometime.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Okay, we'll be in touch. Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Alcohol Tipping Point. I'm always here for you guys, so please feel free to reach out and talk to me on Instagram at Alcohol Tipping Point, and check out my website, alcoholtippingpoint.com. Again, I hope you can use these tips we talked about for the rest of your week. And until then, see you next time.